15 people watched my son tell me I didn't belong at the table I'd been paying for. The next morning, I called the bank and stopped the transfer. $8,100. That's what I'd been sending every month for 8 years. $695,000 total. For a condo with granite countertops and a view of Elliott Bay. For a life where my son, the architect, wouldn't have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning with his hands already cold. At that Christmas dinner, December 24th, 2023, I sat at the far end, next to someone's plus one I'd never met. My son was drunk. His wife was sober. And when she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, that I didn't quite fit with their circle, that the smell of machine oil was difficult to manage, my son didn't defend me. He agreed with her. He stood up, swaying, and told me I was an embarrassment. I didn't argue, I just left. My name is Jameson Phillips, I'm 62. I've been a licensed electrician for 38 years. I own Phillips Electrical Services. Just me and 3 guys who show up on time and know which wire is which. Not fancy, but honest. The kind of work that keeps lights on in hospitals and schools and homes where families eat dinner together. I learned something in my line of work. When a system's overloaded, you don't negotiate. You cut the power. You let it sit in the dark. You see what it does when it thinks nobody's watching. This is a story about what happened when I flipped that switch. Because it wasn't just about the mortgage. Before this was over, I'd discover my son had been forging my signature for months. That $500,000 had been stolen using documents with my name on them. Documents I never signed. That his wife had filed a petition to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could lock me in a nursing home and collect on my $1.9 million life insurance. That Christmas dinner wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment I finally saw the truth. If you've ever been told you're not good enough because of how you make your living, or paid for someone who treated your sacrifice like an inconvenience, stay with me. And if this story sounds familiar, drop your state in the comments. There are more of us than you'd think. I spent 8 years funding my son's dignity. Turns out, I should have been protecting my own. On December 25th, I stopped paying. Not out of anger, not even out of hurt, but because I needed to see what they'd do when the money stopped flowing. What I found was worse than I imagined. They'd been planning for this. Stealing while I was still sending checks. Forging while I was still trusting. But here's what they didn't know. Electricians are very good at finding breaks in the system. And once we find them, we know exactly how to shut everything down. Margaret and I got married in 1984. She was a school secretary. I was an apprentice electrician making $9 an hour. We bought a little 2-bedroom house in Tacoma for $63,000, and we paid it off in 18 years. Daniel was born in 1988. Only child. Margaret had complications, couldn't have more kids after him, so we poured everything we had into making sure he had a better shot than we did. She died 5 years ago, ovarian cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. She fought for 11 months, and I spent every dollar I had on treatment that didn't work. The life insurance paid out $900,000. I put most of it away, paid off medical bills, and set up a fund for Daniel's future kids if he ever had any. Margaret used to handle the hard conversations with Daniel. When he threw tantrums, when he quit things halfway through, when he blamed other people for his problems, she was the one who'd sit him down and make him hear the truth. I was the guy who showed up with tools and taught him how to fix the deck or wire a light switch. After she died, I didn't know how to do her part. So I did what I knew how to do. I worked, and I paid. Daniel met Victoria 6 months after Margaret's funeral. Looking back, I should have seen the timing for what it was. A man who just lost his mother doesn't have great judgment about women, but I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to have someone. They got married 2 years later. Big wedding at some vineyard outside Seattle. 180 people. Open bar, string quartet. The whole thing cost $185,000, and I paid 40% of it because Victoria's parents had liquidity issues. That was the phrase they used, liquidity issues. I didn't care. I wore the suit Margaret had bought me for her sister's funeral, And I smiled in the photos, and I wrote the check. 3 months after the wedding, Daniel called and said they'd found a house. A condo, actually. 1,200 square feet in a new building on Belmont Avenue. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, granite countertops, views of Elliott Bay. The asking price was $760,000. He said they'd been approved for a mortgage, but the payments would be tight. $8,100 a month. Could I help for a year or two, just until they got settled? I said yes. That was March of 2016. I'm good at math. I'm good at spreadsheets. I keep track of everything I spend, everything I earn, everything I owe. It's a habit I picked up when I started my business. You can't run a company if you don't know where your money goes. I've kept every receipt since 1987. Every invoice, every contract, every bank statement. I scan them, save them as PDFs, organize them in an Excel database with 47 categories. Electric bills, groceries, medical. Gifts to Daniel. Daniel used to joke about it. He'd say, "Dad still has the receipt for my baby shoes." He'd laugh. Victoria would smile, that thin smile she did when she thought something was beneath her. I didn't care what they thought. A man keeps records. A man knows what he's owed and what he owes. By 2023, I'd paid $574,300 on that mortgage. Daniel had paid the rest, about $120,000. The house was in his name. The mortgage was in his name. I was just helping. That's what I told myself. Over those 8 years, things changed. Victoria got promoted twice. Their income went up. But the requests for money didn't stop. There was always something. A car repair, a medical bill, a business opportunity that needed seed funding. I said yes every time because I kept thinking, he's my son. This is what fathers do. But I started noticing things. The way Victoria would tense up when I showed up for Thanksgiving. The way she'd steer Daniel away when I tried to talk to him about work. The way she'd whisper to other guests at parties, just loud enough for me to hear. We're trying to set boundaries. Jameson doesn't quite fit with our circle. I noticed. I just didn't do anything about it. Margaret used to say I had a tool for every problem. Turns out, receipts are tools too. I just didn't know I'd need them yet. In November of 2023, Daniel mentioned something in passing. He said, "We're refinancing the condo. Got a better rate." I said, "That's good." He said, "Yeah, should save us a few hundred a month." I didn't think much of it. I should have. December 24th, 2023, 7:30 in the evening. I showed up at their condo with a bottle of wine and a gift card to that kitchen store Victoria liked. I was wearing my good jeans and a button-down shirt Margaret had bought me. I'd showered, shaved. I even used the cologne Daniel gave me last Christmas, still in the box. There were 15 people there. Victoria's parents, her brother and his wife, some colleagues from her agency, a couple Daniel knew from architecture school. I was the only one wearing jeans. Victoria opened the door. She looked at me the way you look at a stain on your carpet. She said, "Jameson, you made it." Not "Hi, Dad," not "Merry Christmas." Just my first name, like I was the plumber showing up to fix a toilet. I walked in. The table was set with white linens and actual silver. There were place cards. My name was at the far end, next to someone's +1 I'd never met. I sat down, didn't say much, just listened. That's when I heard it. Victoria was talking to one of her colleagues, a woman in a black dress with pearls, talking loud enough that I could hear every word. She said, "We've been trying to manage expectations. Jameson doesn't quite fit with our circle. The smell of machine oil, the grammar, it's difficult." The woman looked uncomfortable. She said, "I'm sure he's—" Victoria cut her off. "We're working on boundaries. Low contact is healthiest for everyone." I kept my eyes on my plate. Then Daniel stood up. He'd been drinking. I could tell by the way he swayed, by the way his voice got louder than it needed to be. He looked right at me. He said, "Dad, don't sit at our table. You're an embarrassment." 15 people stopped talking. I looked at him. I said, quiet, "Daniel, I paid for this table." Victoria laughed. It was sharp, like breaking glass. She said, "And we're very grateful. But gratitude doesn't mean we have to pretend you belong here. I stood up. I didn't say another word. I just walked to the door, picked up my coat, and left. I could feel 15 pairs of eyes on my back. The kind of eyes that feel sorry for you. I didn't want sorry. I wanted out. I got in my truck, sat there in the dark, and I made a decision. That was the last dollar they'd ever see from me. I just didn't know yet how many dollars they'd already stolen. One thing I should mention, I wear a body camera when I work. It's a cheap one, $89 from Amazon. I started wearing it 5 years ago after a client accused me of damaging their drywall. I didn't, but I had no way to prove it. So now I wear the camera. Every job, every site visit, every time I'm in someone's house. I wore it to Thanksgiving last year out of habit. Forgot I had it on. I wore it to Christmas dinner too. I didn't realize until I got home that I'd recorded the whole thing. 18 minutes of footage. Timestamp, 7:32 p.m., December 24th, 2023. Clear audio of Victoria saying I didn't fit. Clear audio of Daniel calling me an embarrassment. I saved the file. Backed it up to 3 drives. Didn't know why yet, just knew I might need it. December 26th, 11:43 a.m. My phone rang. It was Daniel. He said, "Dad, the bank called. The mortgage payment didn't go through." I was in my truck, driving back from a job site. I pulled over. I said, "That's right." Silence. Then, "Is this about Christmas?" Because Victoria apologized. No, she didn't. "Okay, she will. But Dad, the payment is due. If we miss it, then you'll have to pay it yourself." His voice went up. "We can't afford that. You know we can't afford that." I kept my voice level. I said, "You're a licensed architect. You make $96,000 a year. I made $38,000 when I started paying your mortgage. That's different. How?" Long silence. Then, "Dad, please don't do this." I said, "I'll talk to you when you're sober." I hung up. He called back 6 times. I didn't answer. And that's when I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I opened my filing cabinet. Every receipt, every document, every signature. If I was cutting them off, I wanted to know exactly what I'd paid for. I spent 2 days going through files. Bank statements, mortgage confirmations, transfer receipts. I pulled up my Excel database, 9,200 entries organized by date and category. I found every payment I'd made to Daniel since 2016, $574,300. But then I found something else, a letter from Pacific Trust Mortgage, dated November 15th, 2023. It said, "Congratulations on your successful refinance." I didn't refinance anything. I kept reading. "Your new loan amount of $485,000 has been processed and disbursed as of November 3rd, 2023. $485,000. I called the mortgage company, waited on hold for 20 minutes, finally got a representative. I said, "I'm calling about a refinance on property at 1847 Belmont Avenue, Unit 12. She pulled up the file. She said, "Yes, sir, the refinance was completed November 3rd. What can I help you with?" "Who signed the documents?" "According to our records, you did, Mr. Phillips. Jameson Phillips." "I'd like to see those documents." "Of course. I can email them to you. What's your email address?" I gave it to her. Hung up. Opened my laptop. The email came through 5 minutes later. I opened the PDF. There was my name. Jameson Phillips, signature line. Dated November 3rd, 2023. Notarized by someone named Sarah Brennan. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine. Almost, but not quite. My real signature has a specific thing I do with the J. A little flourish at the top, something I've done for 40 years without thinking about it. Muscle memory. This signature didn't have it. Someone had practiced my handwriting. Someone had gotten close, but not close enough. I didn't sign that. I grabbed my phone, called the one person I knew could help. Margaret had a friend, Maggie Torres. They met in a book club 20 years ago, stayed close until Margaret died. Maggie was a CPA, forensic accountant. Spent 15 years at the FBI tracking white-collar crime before going into private practice. I hadn't talked to her in 3 years, but I had her number. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "Maggie, it's Jameson Phillips, Margaret's husband." Her voice softened. "Jameson? God, it's been a while. How are you?" "I need help." "What kind of help?" "The kind you used to do for the FBI." Silence. Then, "Tell me everything." We met at her office 2 days later, December 30th, 2:15 p.m. I brought 3 binders: bank statements, mortgage documents, receipts, wire confirmations, everything I had on Daniel's house. Maggie flipped through them. She didn't say anything for 5 minutes. Finally, she looked up. She said, "Jameson, when you said you kept records, I thought you meant tax returns. This is a forensic accountant's wet dream." I said, "That bad?" "No, that good. You've basically built the prosecution's case for them." "So the refinance is real?" She slid the document across the desk. "Oh, it's real. $485,000 November 3rd. But this signature," she tapped it, "is not yours." "I didn't sign that." "I know. Your real signature has a specific flourish on the J. 40 years of muscle memory. This one? Whoever forged it didn't know that." My chest went tight. I said, "How many documents?" She flipped pages. "So far, 6. Power of attorney, refinance, 2 wire authorizations, life insurance beneficiary change, and a medical POA. I'm guessing you didn't know existed." "Life insurance?" She looked at me. "Your policy, $1.9 million. Beneficiary was changed from Margaret to Daniel last October. Another forged signature." I couldn't breathe. She said, "Jameson, this isn't just mortgage fraud. This is identity theft, federal wire fraud, elder abuse. We need to call the police." I stood up. I said, "No, not yet." "Why?" "Because I want to know exactly how deep this goes before I pull them out of the hole." I hired Maggie on the spot, paid her a $10,000 retainer. She said she'd need a week to trace the money. It took her 6 days. January 5th, 2024. She called. She said, "You're going to want to sit down for this." I was already sitting. I said, "Go." "The $485,000 from the refinance? It didn't stay with Daniel and Victoria. It was split into 3 wire transfers. First one, $156,000 to something called Ashford Holdings LLC, transferred November 8th. Second one, $184,000 to a personal account in Nevada under Victoria's father's name, transferred November 15th. Third one, $145,000 to a joint account shared by Daniel and Victoria, transferred November 22nd. Who's Ashford Holdings? Richard Ashford, Victoria's father. It's a shell company, registered in Delaware, no real business activity. He used it to move money around. Why? Maggie paused. She said, "I did some digging. Richard Ashford has a gambling problem. Private poker games, high stakes. He lost $680,000 between 2020 and 2023. And from what I can tell, he owes money to some very serious people." I sat there, silent. Maggie kept talking. "The refinance money? It went to pay his debts, or at least part of them. Victoria used your signature to bail out her father." "What about Daniel?" "He knew about the refinance. There's an email thread I pulled from subpoenaed records. He and Victoria discussed getting Dad's signature in October, but I don't think he knew about the gambling debt." "So my son helped her forge my name, but he didn't know why." "Looks that way." I hung up, sat there in my kitchen, thought about Margaret, what she would have said, what she would have done. She would have told me to call the police, so I did. Tacoma Police Department, Financial Crimes Unit. I asked for a detective who handles elder fraud. They transferred me to Detective Raymond Hayes, 43 years old, former Army MP, 15 years on the force. He'd worked a case 2 years earlier where a man's grandson had stolen $200,000 from him using a fake power of attorney. I drove to the station, January 6th, 10 a.m. Hayes met me in a conference room. I brought my binders. He looked at them. He said, "Mr. Phillips, walk me through this." I did. 30 minutes. Mortgage payments, forged refinance, life insurance change, everything. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. He said, "You have any evidence they forged your signature?" I pulled out the comparison sheet Maggie had made. Original signatures from 1995, 2005, 2015. The refinance signature from November 2023. He studied it. He said, "This is good. This is really good." What happens now? Now I open an investigation. Identity theft, wire fraud, elder abuse. I'll need to subpoena bank records, interview witnesses, get a warrant if necessary. It's going to take time. How much time? Couple weeks, maybe a month. I nodded. What should I do? He looked at me. He said, "Don't contact Daniel or Victoria. Don't tell them you know. Let us build the case." I stood to leave. Hayes said, "Mr. Phillips?" "Yeah?" "You got any more evidence? Anything that shows a pattern of abuse or manipulation?" I thought about the body camera, the Christmas dinner footage. I pulled out my phone, found the file, handed it to him. He watched it, all 18 minutes. When it finished, he looked up. His face was hard. He said, Mr. Phillips, this is a prosecuting attorney's dream. Clear audio of emotional abuse. Witnesses. Timestamp. This alone could support an elder abuse charge. So what now? Now we bring in the FBI. FBI? Wire fraud across state lines. That makes it federal. And if we can prove conspiracy, which we can, this goes way beyond Tacoma PD. I left the station, got in my truck, sat there. For the first time in 8 years, I felt something I hadn't felt since Margaret died. Control, January 8th. Attorney Linda Vasquez's office. 2:15 p.m. Hayes recommended her. 51 years old, elder law specialist, ran a nonprofit legal aid clinic 2 days a week. She'd handled 6 POA fraud cases in the last 3 years. Won all 6. She looked at my documents, didn't say anything for 10 minutes. Finally, she said, Mr. Phillips, in 15 years, I've never seen a client this prepared. Is it enough? It's more than enough. We can file an emergency injunction to freeze any further transactions. We can petition to void the refinance. We can file criminal complaints for identity theft, wire fraud, and elder abuse. And if they've changed your life insurance beneficiary without your consent, we can file a separate fraud claim with the insurance company. How long? The injunction, I can have it filed by end of day. Judge will hear it tomorrow morning. If granted, Victoria and Daniel won't be able to touch another cent. Do it. She did. January 9th, 10 a.m. Pierce County Superior Court, emergency hearing. Judge Patricia Morrison presiding, 58 years old, 20 years on the bench, reputation for zero tolerance on elder fraud. Vasquez presented the evidence. Forged signatures, wire transfers, body camera footage, Maggie's forensic analysis. The judge didn't take long. She said, "Emergency injunction granted. All accounts associated with Daniel Phillips and Victoria Ashford Phillips are frozen pending full investigation. Refinance proceeds are to be held in escrow. Mr. Jameson Phillips is granted temporary sole control of disputed assets." Victoria wasn't at the hearing, neither was Daniel. They found out when their credit cards got declined that afternoon. Detective Hayes called me that night. He said, FBI is officially involved. Agent Morris took the case. They're treating it as organized fraud with possible RICO implications because of the shell company and loan shark connection. I said, what happens next? He said, next we talk to Daniel and Victoria, see if one of them flips. And if they don't, then we build the case until they've got no choice. I hung up. That's when I realized they weren't just trying to rob me. They were trying to erase me. January 8th, 2:15 p.m. Vasquez and I drove to Daniel's condo, unannounced. She wanted to confront them before the injunction hit, before they had time to destroy evidence or coordinate a story. I knocked. Victoria opened the door. She looked surprised, then annoyed. She said, Jameson, we weren't expecting you. I know. Vasquez stepped forward. She said, Mrs. Ashford Phillips, I'm attorney Linda Vasquez. I represent Mr. Phillips in a matter concerning forged financial documents. May we come in? Victoria's face didn't change. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then you won't mind answering some questions." Victoria opened the door wider. "Daniel's not here." "Yes, I am." Daniel appeared behind her. He looked like he hadn't slept. Unshaven, wrinkled shirt. We sat down in their living room, the same living room where, 2 weeks earlier, I'd been told I didn't belong. Vasquez pulled out a folder. She said, "Mr. Phillips, Mrs. Ashford Phillips, we're here about 6 forged documents bearing Mr. Jameson Phillips's signature." Victoria's face stayed smooth. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Vasquez slid the folder across the coffee table. "Refinance documents, power of attorney, life insurance beneficiary change, all dated between October and November last year, all forged." Daniel looked at Victoria. "What is she talking about?" Victoria didn't look at him. She said to Vasquez, "This is harassment. We'll be filing a defamation suit." I spoke for the first time. I said, "Daniel, did you know the house was refinanced?" He looked at me. His eyes were red. He said, "We talked about refinancing for a better rate. Did you know I never signed the papers?" He looked at Victoria, then back at me. He said, I assumed you handled it. Did you know they changed my life insurance to your name? $1.9 million? His face went white. "What? No, Victoria cut in. "We don't have to listen to this. Daniel, they're trying to manipulate you." And I kept my eyes on Daniel. I said, "Look at me, son." He wouldn't. I said, "Look at me." He looked down at his hands. I said, "That's what I thought." Vasquez stood. She said, Mr. Phillips, Mrs. Ashford Phillips, as of 10 a.m. tomorrow, a judge will issue an emergency injunction freezing all accounts associated with your names. The FBI is investigating federal wire fraud charges. If you have anything to say, now would be the time. Victoria stood. She said, "Get out of my house." I stood up, looked at Daniel one more time. He was staring at his hands. I walked to the door, stopped, turned back. I said, "Daniel, your mother would have been ashamed." He flinched like I'd hit him. I left. In the truck, Vasquez said, "You think he knew?" I said, "He knew enough." She said, "FBI is going to want to interview them separately. Try to flip one." "Think it'll work?" "Depends on how deep Daniel's in. If Victoria forged his signature too, which I suspect she did, he might cooperate to save himself." I pulled out of the parking lot. That night I got a text from Daniel. It said, "Dad, please, we can fix this." I didn't respond. An hour later, another text. "I didn't know about the life insurance, I swear." I turned off my phone. January 10th, FBI agent Morris called. He said, "Mr. Phillips, I need you to come to the Seattle field office. We've got some information you'll want to hear." I drove up the next morning, January 11th, 9 a.m. Agent Morris was 46, 20 years, with the Bureau, white-collar crime specialist. He'd worked the Enron case, the Bernie Madoff case, 6 major fraud investigations. He shook my hand. He said, "Mr. Phillips, thank you for coming. We've been digging into Richard Ashford's finances, Victoria's father. And it's worse than we thought. The gambling debt is real, $680,000. But we also found evidence of loan sharking, money laundering, and interstate wire fraud. Richard's been moving money through shell companies for 3 years. The Ashford Holdings account received transfers from 4 other states." "What's that got to do with me?" "Your refinance money didn't just pay his debts. It got laundered through his operation. That makes Victoria complicit in a RICO case." I sat down. RICO? Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. If we can prove Victoria knowingly participated in her father's scheme, she's looking at 8 to 12 years federal prison, not 2 to 4 for simple wire fraud. What about Daniel? Morris pulled out a file. He said, "That's the interesting part. We subpoenaed Daniel's work email, found something." He slid 3 printed emails across the desk. First email, October 15th, 2023, from Victoria to Daniel. Subject, Dad's signature. Message, "We need to get your dad to sign the POA and refinance docs. Can you bring them to him this weekend?" Second email, October 18th. Daniel to Victoria. He's suspicious. Asked why we need POA. What do I tell him? Third email. October 20th. Victoria to Daniel. Don't worry about it. I'll handle the signatures. Just keep him distracted. I looked up. She told him she'd forge my signature. Morris nodded. And he let her. So he's guilty. Of conspiracy, yes. But there's more. He pulled out another document. A bank statement from Cascade Design Group, Daniel's architecture firm. 3 checks. $89,000 total. Written from the firm's operating account. Signed by Daniel Phillips. Except Daniel didn't sign them. Morris said, Victoria forged Daniel's signature to embezzle from his employer. He had signatory authority on the account, but he didn't write these checks. The firm's accounting department found the discrepancy in December. They were investigating internally, but they hadn't confronted Daniel yet. I stared at the checks. Morris said, Victoria didn't just betray you, Mr. Phillips. She betrayed her own husband. Does he know? Not yet, but he will. We're bringing them both in for interviews tomorrow, separately. That's when we'll tell him. I stood up. What do you need from me? Morris looked at me. He said, Nothing, sir. You've done everything right. Now we just need to catch them in the lie. I left the FBI building, got in my truck, and for the first time in 8 years, I let myself feel it. Rage, not the hot kind, the cold kind, the kind that waits. January 12th, Friday afternoon. I was at a job site, rewiring a commercial kitchen when my phone rang. Attorney Vasquez. She said, Jameson, we have a problem. I stepped outside. What kind of problem? Victoria filed a petition this morning, Pierce County Superior Court. She's asking for an emergency competency hearing. My chest went tight. A what? She's claiming you're mentally incompetent, that you're suffering from memory loss, confusion, inability to manage your own affairs. She's filed a petition to have you declared legally incompetent and placed under conservatorship. She's trying to put me in a nursing home. That's the end game, yes. I sat down on the curb. Trucks rolling by, January cold seeping through my jacket. I said, On what grounds? She submitted a doctor's evaluation. Dr. Edwin Clark says he evaluated you for dementia last month. I've never heard of Dr. Edwin Clark. I know, that's the problem. It's fraud. But the petition's been filed, and there's a hearing scheduled for February 2nd. If we don't fight this, if the judge believes her evidence, you could lose control of everything. My house, my business, my accounts. Everything. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Fear, not for money, for freedom. I said, What do we do? We fight. I'm filing an emergency motion to dismiss. We'll demand an independent psychiatric evaluation. We'll present your financial records, proof of competence. We'll present the body camera footage. But Jameson, you need to understand. Victoria's playing for keeps. If she can get you declared incompetent, she and Daniel become your legal guardians. They control your assets. They make your medical decisions. They could lock me up. Yes? I hung up, sat there. That night, I went through my files again, looking for anything about Dr. Edwin Clark. Nothing. I called Maggie Torres. She ran a background check. Took her 2 hours. She called back. She said, Edwin Clark is a licensed physician. Family practice. But here's the thing. He's a friend of Richard Ashford. They went to boarding school together. He's testified in 3 conservatorship cases in the last 5 years. All of them for wealthy families trying to take control of elderly relatives' estates. So he's for hire. Or, essentially, yes. And Jameson, there's something else. The evaluation he filed, it's dated December 10th. That's 2 weeks before Christmas dinner. 2 weeks before you even stopped paying the mortgage. They were planning this before I cut them off. It looks that way. I sat there, silent. Maggie said, Jameson, this isn't just about money anymore. They're trying to erase you. I knew. I called Vasquez. I said, we need to find out how long they've been planning this. She said, I'm already on it. I subpoenaed Victoria's emails. We should have them by Monday. Monday came, January 15th. Vasquez called at noon. She said, you need to see this. I drove to her office. She handed me a printed email thread. September 22nd, 2023. Victoria to Richard Ashford. Subject: The Jameson Problem. Message: Dad, we need to talk about Jameson. He's becoming a liability. If he finds out about the refinance, he'll make trouble. I'm thinking we need a long-term solution. What if we get him declared incompetent? Then we control everything: his accounts, his business, his life insurance. Richard's response: Smart. I know a doctor who can write the evaluation. How much are we talking? Victoria: Life insurance is $1.9 million. Business is worth maybe $300,000. House is paid off, worth about $385,000. Total $2.5 million, give or take. Richard: Do it, but move fast. He's healthy now. Wait too long and it won't be believable. Victoria: I'll handle it. Just need Daniel on board. Next email, October 1st. Victoria to Daniel: Honey, we need to talk about your dad. I'm worried about his memory. Maybe we should have him evaluated. Daniel's response: He seems fine to me. Victoria: Babe, he's 62. He works with electricity. What if he hurts himself or someone else? We should be proactive. Daniel: I guess, but he won't go to a doctor. You know how he is. Victoria: We don't need him to go. I can arrange an evaluation without him knowing. My dad knows someone. I stopped reading. Vasquez said, There's more. She handed me another printout. October 12th, 2023. Victoria to Dr. Edwin Clark. Dr. Clark, as discussed, I need a competence evaluation for my father-in-law. He's 62, showing signs of memory loss and confusion. Attached is background information. Please prepare a report indicating cognitive decline and recommend conservatorship. Fee: $15,000. Wire transfer details below. Dr. Clark's response: Received. Report will be ready by end of month. I looked at Vasquez. She paid him $15,000 to write a fake evaluation, and she did it 6 weeks before you stopped paying the mortgage. This wasn't reactive, Jameson. This was premeditated. I stood up, walked to the window. Vasquez said, There's one more thing. I turned around. She said, The life insurance beneficiary change? It was part of the plan. Once they got you declared incompetent, they'd move you into a nursing home, control your medical decisions, and then I'd die. She nodded. Statistically, elderly men placed in nursing homes against their will have significantly reduced life expectancy, especially if they're isolated from family and friends. They were going to kill me. Not directly, but yes. I sat down. For 38 years, I've worked with electricity. I know what happens when a circuit overloads. I know what happens when wires cross. I know what happens when someone thinks they can bypass the safety and take a shortcut. I know what happens when the system fails. It burns. I looked at Vasquez. I said, I want to fight this, every step. I want them to know they picked the wrong man. She said, Then we need to be smart. The hearing's February 2nd. That gives us 2 weeks. We need an independent psychiatric evaluation, proof of your competence, and we need to expose Dr. Clark's fraud. How? We get you evaluated by a real doctor, someone with credentials they can't challenge, and we get testimony from people who work with you, clients, employees, colleagues, people who can say under oath that you're sharp as a tack. And Dr. Clark? We file a complaint with the Washington Medical Commission, fraudulent evaluation, accepting payment for false testimony, conspiracy to commit elder abuse. If we're lucky, he loses his license before the hearing. I nodded. She said, Jameson, one more thing. If we win this, and we will, Victoria's going to prison. Federal charges, state charges, fraud, conspiracy, everything. She's looking at 6 to 8 years minimum. What about Daniel? Depends on what he does next. If he cooperates, he might get probation. If he stays loyal to Victoria, he goes down with her. I stood up. Then let's find out what kind of man my son really is. January 16th, evening. I sat in my kitchen, thought about what Detective Hayes had said. Let us build the case. I thought about what Agent Morris had said. We need to catch them in the lie. I thought about something Margaret used to say. Give people enough rope, and they'll hang themselves. I called Daniel. He answered on the third ring. "Dad?" I made my voice tired, defeated. I said, "Daniel, it's me." "Dad, I've been trying to call you." "I know. I'm sorry. I've been thinking." Silence, then cautious. "About what?" "About the lawyers, the investigation, all of it." "Okay. I'm tired, son. I'm 62 years old. I don't want to spend my last good years fighting you." "Dad, I don't want to fight either. Then let's end it. I'll sign over the power of attorney. You and Victoria can handle my finances. I'll stop the investigation." Long pause. Daniel said, "Are you serious?" "I'm serious, but I need to hear it from both of you. Can we meet? Thursday morning?" I heard muffled voices, Victoria in the background. Daniel said, "Hold on, Dad." More muffled conversation. Then Victoria's voice. She'd taken the phone. "Jameson, this is Victoria. Did I hear correctly? You're willing to sign POA?" I kept my voice steady. "I'm tired of fighting. Thursday morning works. 10 a.m. We'll have the documents ready. Just one thing." "What?" "I want to understand why you refinanced. I'm not angry. I just want to know the money went somewhere good." Pause, then confident. "Of course. We can explain everything. Thursday." She hung up. I sat there, phone in my hand, called Detective Hayes. He said, "You sure about this?" "I'm sure." "All right. I'll get the warrant for the wire. You'll be wearing a recording device. Everything she says will be admissible in court." "What about Washington's two-party consent law?" "There's an exception when recording is part of an active police investigation with court approval. I filed for the warrant this afternoon. Judge Morrison signed it an hour ago. So it's legal. Completely legal." "What do I do?" "Thursday morning, come to the station at 8. We'll wire you up. You'll wear it to the meeting. Try to get her talking. Ask questions. The more she says, the better." I hung up. Wednesday night, I didn't sleep. Just lay in bed. Thought about Margaret. About the first time Daniel called me Dad. About the day he graduated college, how proud I was. About the Christmas dinner. About the look on his face when he said I was an embarrassment. About Victoria's voice on the phone. Confident. Like she'd already won. Thursday morning, January 18th, 8 a.m., Tacoma Police Department. Detective Hayes met me in a conference room. He had a small recording device, no bigger than a deck of cards. He taped it to my chest, under my shirt, ran the microphone wire up under my collar. He said, "Can you feel it?" "A little." "You'll get used to it. Just act natural. Ask questions. If she confesses, let her talk. Don't interrupt. Don't lead. Just listen." "What if Daniel's there?" "Even better. Conspiracy requires 2 or more people. If they both talk, they both go down." He handed me a small device. "Panic button. Press it if things go bad. We'll be in a van 2 blocks away. Armed response in 90 seconds. I put it in my pocket. Hayes looked at me. He said, "Mr. Phillips, you don't have to do this. We can build the case without a confession." I said, "No, I want her to say it. I want to hear her admit what she did." He nodded. "Then let's get you wired up and ready." 9:45. I drove to Daniel's condo, parked across the street, sat there, checked the recording device, green light, active. Took a breath, walked to the door, knocked. Victoria opened it, smiled. She said, "Jameson, come in." I walked into the condo. Same living room, same white furniture, same view of Elliott Bay through floor-to-ceiling windows. Victoria sat down, gestured to the chair across from her. I said, "Daniel not here yet?" She smiled, thin. "He got stuck in traffic. But we can start without him. You wanted to understand the refinance?" "I did." She leaned back, relaxed, like we were talking about the weather. She said, "It's simple, really. The house had equity. We needed liquidity. Your signature was a formality. A formality I didn't give." She shrugged. "Jameson, let's be honest. You weren't going to say no. You never said no. Where did the money go?" "Family obligations." "Be specific." She paused. Then, "My father had some debts, high-stakes debts, the kind you can't ignore." Gambling? Poker. $680,000. And before you judge, people like my father exist in a world you don't understand. Money flows differently when you're born into it. I kept my voice level. So you stole from me to save him. Stole is a harsh word. We redistributed resources. Redistributed. She leaned forward. Jameson, let me explain something. People like you, working class people, you exist to fund people like us. That's how the economy works. You build things. We manage the wealth. You spend 40 years wiring houses so people like me can live in them. It's symbiotic. I said nothing. She kept going. Daniel understands this. That's why he helped. Helped how? The signatures, the paperwork. He knew we needed your authorization. He held the documents while I practiced. Practiced. Your handwriting, that little flourish you do on the J, took me 3 tries to get it right. My chest was tight. I said, and the life insurance? She smiled. Insurance, in case you became a problem. A problem. Jameson, you're 62. You're single. No hobbies besides work. Statistically, you'll be gone within 15 years. The life insurance was just planning ahead. Planning for me to die. Planning for the inevitable. And honestly, after that stunt you pulled with the lawyers, we thought it might be better to speed things along. I felt cold. Speed things along how? The competency hearing. Dr. Clark's evaluation. Once you're declared incompetent, we become your guardians. We make your medical decisions. Where you live. What treatment you receive. You're talking about a nursing home. A care facility. For your own good. And then... She looked at me, eyes flat. And then nature takes its course. I said, you were going to kill me. Don't be dramatic. We were going to let you live out your remaining years in a place where you'd be cared for. If that accelerated the natural timeline, well, she shrugged. Life insurance exists for a reason. I stood up slowly. She said, where are you going? We haven't signed the papers yet. That's all. I said, Victoria, can I ask you something? What? Did you know I was wearing a body camera? Her smile froze. I tapped my chest. 14 minutes. Clear audio. Confession to wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and elder abuse. The kind of recording that gets you 6 to 8 years in federal prison. Her face went white, then red. She stood. You... The door opened. Detective Hayes walked in. 2 FBI agents behind him. Hayes said, Victoria Ashford Phillips, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and attempted murder through medical neglect. He pulled out handcuffs. Victoria looked at me. For the first time, she looked scared. Hayes read her Miranda rights. The whole thing. She didn't say a word. One of the FBI agents turned to me. Mr. Phillips, thank you for your cooperation. This recording will be entered as evidence. I nodded. They led Victoria out in handcuffs. I stood there, in the living room where 7 weeks earlier, I'd been told I was an embarrassment. My phone buzzed. Text from Agent Morris. Daniel Phillips arrested at Cascade Design Group, both in custody. I walked out of the condo, got in my truck, sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just sat there and thought about circuits, about overloaded systems, about what happens when you cut the power and let people sit in the dark. They show you who they really are. February 3rd, 2024. FBI Seattle Field Office. Agent Morris called me in. He said, we need to show you something. Daniel was in an interrogation room. I could see him through one-way glass. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thin, pale, like he hadn't slept in weeks. Morris said, we told him about Victoria's confession, about the nursing home plan, about the life insurance. What'd he say? He broke down. Said he knew about the refinance, knew about the forged signatures, but he swears he didn't know about the rest. You believe him? Morris pulled out a folder. There's something else, something Victoria did that Daniel didn't know about. He laid out 3 documents, bank records from Cascade Design Group. These are the checks Victoria forged using Daniel's signature, $89,000 embezzled from his employer. She did it between August and October of last year. Daniel had signatory authority, but he didn't write these checks. I stared at the documents. Morris said, Victoria didn't just betray you, Mr. Phillips. She betrayed her own husband. Daniel's facing charges too, conspiracy to commit wire fraud on you. But he's also a victim of her fraud. What does that mean? It means he has a choice. Cooperate against Victoria, testify to everything he knows, and we offer him a deal. Or stay silent and he goes to prison for 3 to 5 years. What kind of deal? 2 years probation. Restitution to you, $50,000 over 5 years, 200 hours community service, mandatory counseling, no jail time. And if he doesn't take it, then he goes to trial as a co-conspirator, and he loses. I looked through the glass, at my son, sitting there with his head in his hands. Morris said, "Do you want to talk to him?" "Yeah." They brought me into the room. Daniel looked up. His eyes were red. He said, "Dad." I sat down across from him. I said, "Agent Morris told me about the embezzlement, about what Victoria did to you." He nodded, couldn't speak. I said, "Did you know about the nursing home plan?" He shook his head. "I swear I didn't. I knew about the refinance. I knew she forged your signature. But I thought it was just to get the money faster. I didn't know about the rest. I didn't know she was planning to..." His voice broke. "To kill me?" He started crying. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I sat there, watched him. Finally, I said, "Sorry isn't enough." He looked up. I said, "But it's a start. What do I do?" "You take the deal. You testify against her. You pay restitution. You go to counseling. And you rebuild your life. Not the life she wanted for you. The life you should have had." "Will you..." He stopped, started again. "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about it. About Margaret. About 8 years of payments. About that Christmas dinner. I said, "I don't know, but here's what I do know. Forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust isn't something you give. It's something you build, one honest conversation at a time." He nodded. I stood up, walked to the door, stopped. I said, "Daniel, your mother taught you how to be good. Victoria taught you how to be weak. It's time you figured out how to be strong." I left. Behind me, I heard him crying. 8 months later, August 15th, 2024. Victoria Ashford Phillips was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, attempted elder abuse. She'll be eligible for parole in 4 years. I won't be at that hearing. Daniel took the plea deal. 2 years probation, $50,000 in restitution, 200 hours community service. He lost his job at Cascade Design Group. Found work as a junior draftsman at a smaller firm. Makes $62,000 a year now. Less than half what he used to make. We have dinner once a month. First Tuesday, 6 p.m. He picks the restaurant. He pays. He hasn't missed one yet. It's not warm, but it's honest. I started something new, a nonprofit called Phillips Trade Mentorship. We teach electrical, plumbing, carpentry to kids from working-class families. Kids who can't afford trade school. Kids who've been told their whole lives that working with their hands isn't good enough. We're in a rented workshop in the Tacoma Industrial District. 2,400 square feet. The first cohort, 23 students. 12 electrical, 8 carpentry, 3 plumbing. One of them is a kid named Brandon, 19 years old, single mom, works nights at a warehouse to help pay rent. Last week he wired his first panel by himself. When he was done, he flipped the breaker. Lights came on. He looked at me and said, "Mr. Phillips, I did that." I said, "Yeah, you did." He said, "Nobody ever taught me I could do something like this." I said, "Well, now you know." That's what I'm doing with the restitution money. The $695,000 Victoria has to pay back. Every dollar goes into the program. Some people think I should have forgiven Daniel by now, that I should let him back into my life completely. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust. And trust, that's something you build, one honest conversation at a time. We're on dinner number 8. We've got a long way to go. Here's what I learned. Betrayal doesn't just cost you money, it costs you the story you told yourself about who people are. For 8 years, I told myself Daniel was a good man who needed help. Turns out he was a weak man who needed consequences. For 40 years, I told myself working with your hands was something to apologize for. Turns out it's the thing I'm proudest of. Some of you listening have paid for people who didn't deserve it. Some of you have been told you're not good enough because of what you do for a living. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. The day you stop paying is the day you start living. If this story meant something to you, share it. And if you've got a kid who needs to learn a trade, look us up. We're out there, building things, the way it's supposed to be done. I'm Jameson Phillips, and I'm not embarrassed anymore.